Welcome to Real Deep Stuff. We've saved your seat at the table for this conversation. We're so glad you're here. Welcome back to part 2 with Wilkie Pitman as she shares her amazing journey through her double lung transplant. And we're so excited that she's here this month because April is National Donate Life Month. Stay tuned after our conversation to find out how you can become a registered organ donor. Back to the conversation. How long was your surgery?
The surgery was about 10, 11 hours.
That is a lot. A lot of time to be under anesthesia and everything.
Yeah, that was one reason that I was a high risk. They had to do that whole chest wall reconstruction and then the transplant. And one interesting part about that is because of all that extra work they had to do in there, they decided not to staple me up where my incision was. And that incision, and you can edit this out if it's not appropriate, but my incision goes underneath one armpit to the other armpit, and it's kind of they call it a clamshell. It's like a scalloped incision up under my breast, and they didn't close me after surgery. So,
and why?
They wanted it to heal from the inside out to reduce infection.
Yes,
if they'd sewn it up and had been infection, it would have been bad.
Yeah.
So they told me they thought it would take about 4 weeks to close that wound. So my transplant was on January the 26th, 2020, and that wound closed in April of 2021, 15 months later. So, and that's just another miracle in this whole thing, that I had an open wound that large, and over time it got smaller, but I had an open wound for 15 months. First, that it would ever heal after that long is a miracle, but second, that it never got infected. Because an infection in a transplant patient can be serious.
Sure.
I'm on all these anti-rejection medicines that makes it very hard to fight off an infection. And so...
Was it normal to take that long?
No.
What were they saying about that?
Well, it's just that it was so massive. I mean, it was how many inches long that is, and it was probably 3 inches, 4 inches wide.
Like, how did you shower?
I didn't. I was not allowed to shower for a year and a half, practically.
Whoa.
I had to take sponge bath. I had to boil water and sponge bathe with boiled water. I couldn't drink tap water until their rule is you cannot bathe or drink tap water until your wounds are healed.
That doesn't say a lot about our water.
Yeah.
I'm glad I have the filter on my water.
I do drink tap water now, but there's some people in my transplant group that won't ever drink it. They're scared to drink it. I don't drink when I travel out of the country,
right?
Which no one would. But I do drink. But there's a lot of rules after transplant with anti-rejection medication. I wash a banana before I eat it, before I cut open a banana or peel it. Everything that
probably buy organic, maybe.
Well, it's just a matter of how it's been handled. You don't know if it's been washed and cleaned or whatever, and it just can't introduce any kind of bacteria. You can't, can't eat. Bye-bye to sushi. No more sushi. No more medium rare
steak,
prime rib.
Yeah.
Runny egg. All those good things are not part of my on my acceptable list, but
small cost to count
yes, it
to
is.
Have you here
exactly
today.
So it was about a 11-hour surgery overnight. I will say this, I was not alert in the recovery room, but I knew what was going on. I could hear people talking.
Okay.
I could hear my nurse saying things, and not that she said anything bad, but she was saying things and she was banging things around trying to get me to wake up.
Oh, really?
But I couldn't wake up, and I remember having these thoughts in my mind like, Wilkie, you have been asleep for 2 weeks, and everybody is worried about you, and you need to wake up out of this coma you're in from the surgery. And when I did wake up,
really been?
No, it had been like 24 hours. But it's like in my mind, I had these thoughts in my own mind.
Sure.
The surgery was Sunday night into Monday, and I woke up on Tuesday.
Okay.
But I didn't feel right. I thought I had had a stroke or something, because I know they were giving me a lot of pain medication, but I just felt so off. till about Saturday that I was like, I wonder if I'm going to get out of this fog.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of worried me and scared me a little bit, but
Sure.
it did clear. But that ICU, I was in ICU for 2 weeks. Again, these are not normal. So if you're listening to this and their normal is to be out of the hospital in about 2 weeks. Amazingly,
Wow.
the average is they're in the hospital for about 2 weeks.
That
2 to
is
3
incredible.
weeks. I was in the ICU on a ventilator for 2 weeks. So, 2 weeks on the ventilator. I was on ECMO. Dwight's called ECMO, which is similar to like a heart-lung bypass for the first 24 hours, just to kind of it is a life support system that just kind of lets your heart and lungs rest.
Okay. It's like I got
to
this
keep
shift,
you alive.
just rest.
So this is like the trauma of that is over a little bit. Not everybody has that, but I needed that. I did have a trach. I had 9 chest tubes.
Were you aware of the trach?
Oh yeah, because I had it capped until the day I left, like 7 weeks later. I was in ICU for 2 weeks and stepped down for 5. So I was in the hospital after my transplant for 7 weeks, which is very long.
Was it claustrophobic for you to have that trachea too?
No, it doesn't make you feel claustrophobic, but it hurts. It didn't feel good. Every time they would roll you, it would.
Maybe it's a personal thing, and you're a much stronger person than me. When I had some surgery, I had a breathing tube down my throat, and in recovery, I woke up before they expected. And I remember being one eye open, and the nurses were like, she's awake, go pull. And they had to pull the tube out with me fully awake. And I just remember feeling like that was incredibly claustrophobic. But
I'm sure it's probably different when they go down your throat, but I had I had the tracheostomy, so it's in my throat, not in my mouth.
So you didn't really feel it.
It doesn't. It probably has you feel it, and it for me, I had a cut or something under that was quite large. I mean, you can see my scar is not small. It's not too pretty. And not everybody has to have a
honestly
trach.
Didn't notice it till you.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that's like
I didn't notice it.
something I really don't love. But I mean, what are you going to do? But
it's a battle scar.
It's okay.
It's of how strong you are.
That vein about it, but it was like I really wasn't expecting it, because in the pre-transplant phase, had I been the normal transplant person who went as an outpatient, had all the testing, went to the pre-rehab. Part of that pre-rehab is you have to have an identified caregiver and a backup caregiver, and they have to sign contracts that they will provide your care post-op, because they know that a transplant patient is not likely to be able to take care of themselves fully and keep themselves motivated to take their meds and do all that they're supposed to do to get well. And they hold a caregiver responsible to hold you responsible.
Yeah.
And in part of that, caregiver has to go through training. It's so well thought out. They have classes they go to that teach them about what to expect, and when they go into the ICU room and see all these machines, what they're for and what they're doing, and all of these things. So having that exposure and knowledge of what all is going on, I think is really, really helpful.
That's remarkable, for sure.
So anyway.
So at 7 weeks, did they deem you fully recovered?
Oh gosh, no, Christy. You say that facetiously, because it was a while.
Well, maybe like fully recovered from that part of the surgery, not fully recovered. Go have a nice life.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that the main reason I stayed in the hospital so long was because of my wound.
Okay.
It just needed care and daily care.
Yeah.
And I still had a trach too, and I was very debilitated, and I was getting therapy in the hospital, and I left the hospital still needing help to get up and down from a chair.
Oh,
after 7 weeks, I
really?
couldn't get out of a chair by myself still.
Just because if you were so weak?
I was so weak.
Okay.
I was so weak. I remember waking up in the ICU, and I felt paralyzed. I couldn't move a bone in my body. I couldn't wiggle I could wiggle my toes, but I couldn't move my leg on the bed. Somebody had to pick it up and move it. I was that weak.
Well, I know the muscles will atrophy and such, and did the post-op medications help with that to make you feel weaker?
Well, I take prednisone, and I will take prednisone for the rest of my life, and that does deteriorate your muscles. So it's something I still combat and have to stay active. And I'm in therapy right now. I've done 2 or 3 different courses of therapy. The doctor's really great about making referrals for me. I've been having some issues with my back, which is also a side effect of the prednisone. I've developed some pre-op osteoporosis. They call it osteopenia, where I'm heading towards osteoporosis because of the prednisone, along with other things that prednisone. I'm in stage 3 kidney disease from the prednisone.
Oh, no.
It's not uncommon, not often, but it's not unheard of for transplants of any kind who have to take all these medicines that are processed in your kidneys to need kidney transplants down the road. So in my support group, there's a fair number of people who talk about having had kidney transplants 2 or 3, 4 years after their lung transplant.
Wow. So
that, I don't know if that will be in my future or not, but I do have some damage to my kidneys from the prednisone and the Prograf, my primary anti-rejection med that I take twice a day.
Wow.
I've got neuropathy in my feet. I have diabetes from prednisone, where I shouldn't say I have diabetes. I have, my blood sugar is affected by my prednisone. It's a medication.
I know, it raises it.
Yeah.
Prednisone.
So I don't have to take insulin very often at all. Rarely, quite honestly, but occasionally I do.
Okay. Because of a drop?
No.
Or because it goes too high? Okay.
And then, yeah.
Wow. So there's a...
You know, it's like my doctors told me, that same doctor that came in, Dr. Haney, before the transplant to say they would list me, he was very clear to say, you know, lung transplant is not a cure. We're just going to exchange one set of problems for another. And truth be told, the average length of additional life for a lung transplant is about 7 to 9 years. And I'm on year 3. However, there's great hope. You know, there's people in my support group from all over the world. I just celebrated my 15th year anniversary. I just celebrated my 14th, my 18th.
Yeah.
And the longest living person with a lung transplant was actually one of the very first people to receive one, and he received it at UNC Chapel Hill, and he just recently died, and he lived for 33 years.
There you go. So why not you? Why
absolutely.
not?
I have a lot of hope in that.
Absolutely.
You know, the support group has been a big part of my post-transplant journey, and I get a lot of
that. Yeah.
It's a two-edged sword, though, because while we celebrate a lot of victories, there's a lot of hard things that are shared there as well, and it can be upsetting. And even though I've met a couple of people face-to-face when I go to clinic, but most of the people, I have never met them face-to-face, but we chat daily. Frequently.
Do you do like a Zoom? Or?
No, it's all on Facebook.
Okay.
So it's just messaging.
Yeah.
And it's mostly questions like, have you ever had this?
Yeah.
My lab says this. Has anyone ever had that? Do you know what that means? I'm on this medicine. What's the side effect of that? Please pray for my wife. She's had to go back in with rejection, things like that.
Sure. That is a really great, priceless resource.
It is.
For all of you to have someone that you don't have to explain it all to get to your question. Right. You just be like, here's my question.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I got it. Yeah. Wow.
Duke has one of their own that I think a Duke transplant person's wife actually started, and he has since passed, and she still continues to monitor, be the administrator of it. But it's open to anyone, so there's transplant people in that group from all over the U.S. and even outside of the U.S. And then I'm in another one that's just, it says lung transplant. I get the sense it's somewhere, possibly in Australia, because it's full of Australian transplant folks. Okay. But it might be abroad, but it's very international, that one.
Yeah. Well,
and it's interesting because people do things differently in different centers, even in this country.
Sure.
And then certainly do them differently in other countries. So, yeah.
Well, if we could pause for a second and circle back to did you feel like you went through a grieving process of losing part of your, first you lost your 2 ribs, which was unexpected, and now you've lost your 2 original lungs. Is there a grieving process to losing part of your body?
I didn't experience that personally. I felt like, these are bad parts of my body and good riddance in a way. I was eager to be able to receive a transplant. I would say the only thing I've really grieved is maybe some lifestyle changes. You do have to adjust. There's things I just can't do anymore.
Okay.
And my job is one of them. I don't feel like I'll ever be able to go back to physical therapy. I don't physically feel like I could do that. And I don't know that it's necessarily wise for me to be around sick people.
Totally agree.
And germs and things. I have to be kind of careful about things like that. Yeah, I've had to just realize it takes me longer to do things that I want to do. You were asking me earlier about the recovery. I went through 5 weeks in the hospital getting me ready to be discharged from the hospital. Duke likes to keep you in the area for about 3 months after your transplant. They see you weekly and check on you very closely. So I went to my brother's house, and I actually stayed. I was discharged March the 13th. I can remember it because it was a Friday the 13th of 2020. And if that rings a bell to anybody, they will know that was the weekend that the governor shut the state down.
Yes, I remember well.
So, and again, that's just another miracle that God did. He got me out of the hospital before all those COVID cases started coming into the hospital, which could have been very dangerous for me.
That's the worst case scenario for you. Perfect storm. Wow.
And even when COVID started coming into the North Carolina region around that time, it was shortly after that they stopped doing transplants for a short season. I don't know how long it was, but they just didn't perform any because it was too high risk. So if I hadn't had mine when I did, I might not have gotten it, and who knows if I would have survived to get one later. Right. So the Lord worked that out.
Right.
So, but I got home to my brother's home before COVID really hit.
Yeah, I think the reason I asked about the grieving process is, I'm not medical, but I just observe and I see people go through maybe grieving when they've lost, like an amputee has lost a leg or an arm or a foot, like military combat or diabetes or something like that, and then women with needing a mastectomy, or even in chemotherapy, hair loss is traumatic for people. So just a curious question on a body part you can't see. Do you still feel that type of grief that part of you is not there?
I don't grieve the loss of my lungs.
Wow. Okay. So you didn't. That's awesome. And we talked about your healthcare workers. I'm sure you think that they are community heroes. How did they help you on the backside? Like you were talking about how they because they work in such a niche field that they kind of probably all wear a little bit of a counselor cap, just on their daily routines. How were they on the other side of surgery for you?
I can't say enough about how lucky we are to have such a premier medical institution like Duke in our backyard and have access to the cares and research and cutting edge technologies that they have. So everybody there, I never honestly met or encountered anyone who wasn't more than completely compassionate and professional. And I mean, absolutely everyone. The women who came in the middle of the night to take my blood and take my chest x-rays, and the sweet little ladies that cleaned my room and brought my food and everything. I mean, just so kind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I spent Christmas in the hospital. I spent Thanksgiving in the hospital. I spent New Year's in the hospital. I did get out before Easter. But yeah, you're going to see what people are made of when you are in the hospital on Christmas night or Christmas Eve.
Yes. Yes.
Absolute sweethearts, glad to be here.
They're called to those jobs as you were as a physical therapist for so many years.
Yeah.
So when you got to a point where all those amazing workers were ready to release you, can you talk to us about what it felt like on your journey home? You were now going to be going home, and like what it felt like to go into your home, like physically. They
make a big deal out of your discharge when you're there, as long as I was, and they all, even down to the I don't know what their title is, but she's basically like the secretary of the ward. Everybody is out there doing their labs, and they have all these encouraging little tactics to help you with that. They have, you've seen those little buttons that Staples sells that says, what does it say? Like, I did it or whatever. I don't know.
What's the button?
The little button. Anyway.
Oh my goodness. It's totally blank.
Me too.
I know what you mean.
It's one of their little commercial.
Easy button?
Yeah.
Easy button?
That's easy. Whatever.
That's easy, yeah.
They have those along the counter so you can tap them when you make your laps. They give you this little string that has colored beads, and you move your beads as you do your laps, and they all want to know how many laps you did. So it's a team. It's a real team there. Nice. So they all come out of their rooms when you leave and give you a clap, down the hallway kind of thing to see you go. But I had been in the hospital. Essentially, I was home for a week or two here and there. This has been since the end of July, and now we are in May that I've been in the hospital. I'm sorry, that was at my brother's till May. I got out of the hospital in March, so that's a long time to be in the hospital. I wasn't depressed, but I think my family thought I was depressed because they offered often to take me in the wheelchair. There were times when I couldn't do that because I had a chest tube or the various medical things that kept me in the room. But when I was off of some of that, they wanted to take me off the floor. Yeah. And I never really wanted to go. I didn't want to go outside. So I had not been outside in months to feel air on my face.
That alone can have psychological ramifications, honestly. That sunlight, the fresh air.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't want to go out, but I just knew it was going to take a lot of effort, and I wanted to save that energy and effort for other things. And so I was like, no, I don't want to go. But so it was very surreal in a way to go outside for the first time in a very long time and just feel the sunshine on my face and all of that.
Was it over sensory? Or
no, it was very pleasant. It was very pleasant. It was very odd. Very, very odd to be outside again after many, many months of not doing anything but looking out the window. And I did not have a great view in my hospital room, unfortunately.
Yeah. Wow.
So, and I went to my brother's house. I stayed there, like I said a minute ago, and I went to post-rehab for about 2 months. And they had certain goals they wanted me to achieve before I could come home to Charlotte. And one of them was getting up from the ground by myself, and that was a challenge.
Like if you're sitting on the ground, you have to get up.
Off the floor.
Okay.
And they really wanted you to be able to get up from a chair without using your arms. And that was really, my legs were just weak and I couldn't do it. So it took me a couple of months, but I did meet those goals with a lot of hard work and determination. I was going to therapy every single day. So I was allowed to come home on Mother's Day weekend in May of 2021. I came home on Saturday and Mother's Day was the next day. And I was still on a walker to walk. I had balance issues and I didn't quite trust myself, and so I was still using a rolling walker. So this is how many months? January to May, and I'm still on a walker. So I started therapy here in Charlotte and got better a lot faster once I got home. I think part of being, we were fortunate to have my brother's house to stay in, but he has a small little house, and it's not my house, so I'm not going to putter around in his home.
Right.
I would try to do a little walking, and there were 4 of us and a dog there, and it was crowded, and I just kind of, we had a hospital bed in his living room that I used because I couldn't get up the steps to the bedrooms. And so I didn't really, it wasn't that I was lazy and didn't want to do anything. I just didn't want to be intrusive into his space that much. But once I got home, I started, like I told you earlier, we had just recently moved into that home, and I couldn't remember where I put anything. Yeah. So I kind of basically redid my whole kitchen, and I very soon started climbing the stepladder to get things redone in the kitchen, and went through my closets and drawers and just nested everything, and because of that I got a lot better a lot quicker.
Oh, absolutely. Because I know that despite not having a good view in the hospital, I know that you were just so grateful to be able to be there and do what, all that needed to be done. And then you were so grateful to be at your brother's house. But ultimately, there's no place like home. No. Even if it's a new home that you're like, wait, what?
Oh, yeah.
what house am I in? But it's your home. Yeah. So, of course, it makes sense that it would expedite your healing to be in your space.
It was. We were in a new home. We didn't know people there yet. Yeah. And that's something we never even thought about. But our next door neighbor, who we had never met, mowed our lawn the whole time we were gone. So that the HOA would not hassle us. And
what a gift.
And I had never even met them. So that was, amazing to come home and feel welcome. But it was
loved and cared for.
It was good to be home.
Yeah, and then maybe, on the other side of all of this, you got to kind of put your house in order the way it was going to work better for you now, even than if you, had gotten all that done beforehand.
True.
So
true. It was like Christmas in a way.
Yeah.
Oh, there's that. I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah. Rediscovering our own stuff is so fun. It's like we don't have to go out and buy a bunch of new things.
Yeah.
It's like, I forgot about that.
I did.
Yeah. Step ladder, so I guess your balance was getting better then.
It was. I have had a couple of falls. Both of them were in the yard where I just kind of hit an uneven place. And it's been over a year now that I fell, but I have to be really careful because of the osteoporosis. I was lucky I didn't break anything.
Because of brittleness.
I think I kind of always have that in the back of my mind.
Sure.
Be careful.
Sure. You mentioned a rejection issue. What
So rejection is a scary word in the world of transplants. They try to educate you on that, and there are different types of rejection. I had an acute episode of rejection at my 1-year anniversary of my lung transplant. The first year, you go every 3 months to see the doctor. It might have even been a little more often than that the first year, but they do what's called a bronchoscopy, where they put you to sleep, like the same methods of like when you have a colonoscopy or something like that. They go down into your lungs, and they just kind of look around briefly and take a little small tissue piece for examination.
Yeah.
And they're looking for signs of inflammation that might indicate rejection. About 50% of lung transplant patients will have rejection in the first year. And if it's the acute form of rejection, it's very easily treated with an adjustment in your medications. And so I had been through a lot of bronchoscopies while I was in the hospital. Every time something would change, they would do a bronch to see if everything was okay. And then I was having them every time I went to Duke that first year. And so I was kind of surprised. I was at the year mark before it ever showed up for me. What they prescribe is the first line of defense is to do an IV of steroids for 3 days. And I had that done at home in Charlotte. A home nurse came out to do that. And then they do a follow-up bronch about a month later. And for me, they did that, and it didn't improve. So the next line of defense is to do a different medication. It's called RATG, which for the initials RATG. It's a rabbit antithymoglobulin or something like that. It's like rabbit T cells, their immune system T cells.
Yeah.
And as weird as that sounds, it's very effective. It's about 95% effective in reversing acute rejection.
Oh, wow.
But they want you to be in the hospital. This is what I was talking about earlier about there are people on my floor who are there for RATG treatments, and they're fine, but and they're walking around, and you almost think they're a family member visiting somebody, but they want to monitor you closely because there can be some very serious side effects in some people. Unfortunately, I was one of those people.
Oh, no.
So I had they had nasty side effects, but I had an allergic reaction to the RATG, which is unfortunate because now it's no longer on the table for me to use as a defense if I have rejection again. And it's so effective that's kind of disappointing for me that I can't ever have that again.
But you can't help an allergic reaction.
It's just
that is what it is.
So there's the plan is 3 treatments. 3 is an IV, and you get it 3 separate days. I got the first one, and I had all the side effects. Pretty sick after that, but it's kind of like the stomach flu kind of thing. The second day is when I had like full body rash, everything swelling up kind of reaction.
Rash is pretty.
And then everything was
big
kind of
side effect for allergic. Wow.
So after the second day, they decided, well, of course, I can't have the 3rd treatment, so I wasn't sure if I'd had enough of them for it to work. So they said, well, let's just give you the 2, obviously, and stop at that, and we'll see how it goes. And they went back in about 4 weeks later and had another bronchoscopy, and it had reversed my rejection. So that was 2+ years ago, and I haven't had any issues since. So I'm fortunate on that.
That's really great.
So, and there are other treatments, but the most effective one is just not in my repertoire anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you won't need
I hope
anything.
Not. I hope not.
Yeah.
I pray not. But I think there's hope that if I do, it's okay. It's not something to get panicked about.
Sure.
Initially, yeah.
Sure. Have you felt on this side of everything any moment where you just kind of think, I'm good? Or do you kind of live feeling like, your health could teeter at any minute either way?
First off, I would say I still, in the still places in my life, go, did this really happen to me?
Right, this is a bad dream.
I cannot believe that this is my life. What in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like you can't even believe it sometimes.
Yeah.
But more directly to your question is, I feel like I do have that conversation from the doctor. We're trading one set of problems for another. 7 to 9 year prognosis kind of thing. I mean, I have tried to, and I am positive. I feel good. I'm doing great, and I look around when I go to the clinic, and I know I'm doing well.
Mm-hmm.
When I see on my support group, and I see physically with my eyes some of the other people in the clinic, and I realize I'm one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
But I do try to live and take care of myself as best as I can in anticipation of if something were to happen, they would give me another transplant.
Okay. And they've said
And
that.
they have not. I just hope that they
I
would.
see.
And I mean, if I'm and they have done that with other people on my support group. I see people. I'm getting my second done.
Yeah.
Age would be an issue. I am 61. I'll be 62 this year. I don't think that would be on the table for me if I hit the 70 plus mark. Maybe early 70s. I don't want something to happen between now and 70 just to get that second one, but that might be an issue that would make it harder for them to want to do that for me.
I really like what you're saying about how you're doing everything proactively to keep you as healthy as you can.
Right.
Well, generally speaking, for a better quality of life, but also in case you had to have another one. It makes me think about, do you remember when the plane, Captain Sully landed the plane from Charlotte to New York, landed in the Hudson? And I was reading the different passengers' remarks on that later in an article, and one guy said that it was such a good reminder for him to always stay in the best health possible because you never know when you're going to need it. And he was like, I was just thinking, if I was not in the shape that I was, could I have gotten out and on the wing and, lifted off or however they did it? And his words have never left me. It's like, wow, you again, like kind of do things before you need to reap the benefit of it.
Right.
So like, it's really great that you're keeping proactive about your health, just quality of life now, and to keep yourself ready, God forbid you need another one. I think that's great. Because I think, a lot of people just kind of live in this haze of day to day, week to week, month to month, and we just kind of just coast in this like nebulous fog, like this is just whatever. And things can happen. Things can change the scenario so fast.
That's true. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think this is probably one of the only negative things about my journey, and it's something that I'm working on with the Lord daily. But before this ever happened, I'm sure if anyone else has been through a trauma of any kind, you live this life of like, that doesn't happen to me, that happens to somebody else. Nothing bad's going to happen in my life. And when something bad happens in your life, you begin to expect bad things to happen in your life. Or it's almost like you're waiting for that other shoe to drop, as they say.
Yeah.
And that's not a good way to live, and God would not want us to live that way. He came that we would have life and have it abundantly.
Yes.
Filled with joy. And this is a conversation I have a lot with the Lord. It boils down to just a lack of faith, and it's just my Achilles heel, and something that I struggle with. I'm working daily to have more victory in that God brought me through this for a reason, and He's faithful, and He's good, and He has a plan.
Yes.
And He will accomplish it, and I don't need to worry about it anymore. So
that's right. I love Psalm 139 that says every one of our days were written in His book before one of them came to be.
There you go.
He already knows.
He does.
And it's not our burden to bear, to wonder and worry and wring our hands over how much longer, because that's already been
decided.
Yeah, absolutely. And how great that He gives us the responsibility to say, how are you going to use this time, And I could totally see, I think everybody would struggle with that as well. I think probably what you're feeling is very normal, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I know. I just know for me that's something that I've struggled with. I've always been a proponent of I wish I had journaled. I'll put it like that. I wish I had journaled more during that season. I just really wasn't able. It's a great tactic to recall the Lord's blessings and faithfulness to give you encouragement and hope.
Yes.
And, I talk with my daughter a lot about this lately. She's in the midst of a job search, and I was like, God has helped. Look how he did this for you in this other situation. He proved himself faithful. It's going to work out.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true of this journey. It's like I've just described to you all the ways that the Lord prepared me and walked with me and put me in the right hospital rooms and with the right doctors and fixed things that were wrong with my ribs and my back and protected me from infection and all these things. I mean, it was a lot of stuff that he did. Why would you say, why do you even, how could you not trust him? I'm bone and flesh.
You're human,
And I do struggle.
And I mentioned it must be a normal feeling, and that doesn't at all, I don't mean to diminish what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, I hope that there's no self-shame or guilt in feeling those, because I really think he understands us, and
he does.
And we are just human. We're going to feel it all, and he knows
that too,
for sure. And speaking of feeling things, when you talk about genuinely having PTSD and the trauma, I did an episode earlier with EMDR, because I've been working with EMDR for a couple of years now. It's changed my life. And have you considered doing anything like that to help with this, or do you feel like it's pretty manageable on your own?
I'm somewhat of a pragmatic person, and I guess with my medical background, it kind of helps to just not run away with certain fears about medicine. I just kind of look at things practically and know it's going to be okay in the end, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense, but I did have some therapy, like I mentioned, immediately after. I think I remember going through those times, and it was, I just felt like telling the therapist, I feel like God's going to take care of this, and I don't really need to go through this therapy, I don't know.
But you don't have any like moments of triggers, like smells or sights or something on TV, if it's a hospital show?
That's funny. This will be crazy. I was in the hospital, for the season before Christmas. There is a commercial, and I forget the name of the device, but it's that mirror that you exercise in front of. And the jingle that they play with that commercial, if I heard that once, I heard it 1,000 times or more at Duke. And if I hear, and they recycle that commercial when it comes around Christmas time, when people buy those kinds of things at the first of the year when you're setting your New Year's. If I hear that commercial, I'm back in my hospital room.
Fascinating.
And I'm upset. I can't handle it. Wow. I have to turn it off. Yeah.
We hold our memories in so many different ways inside of us, whether it's through our, what we're hearing, what we're smelling, what we're tasting, seeing. It doesn't have to be so black and white. It can be something so unexpected like that. Yeah.
That just takes me right back to the day.
Sure.
And I ate a lot. I couldn't eat very well. That was something that I struggled with. It's not uncommon with lung transplants. They have to move everything around in your digestive tract so much. I now have a lifelong issue to deal with my esophagus that doesn't move the food down in a coordinated way, and I have to think about how much I eat at one time and things
Small
like
bites
that.
Or chew it more.
Yeah, just not large meals and smaller meals through the day, things like that. And then when it does go down, it sits in my stomach longer than it should. So that kind of makes you feel sick. I didn't eat much, and I didn't eat well in the hospital, and it kind of probably delayed my healing and whatnot. But I just had all this going on, and it just was difficult.
Yeah.
So I did eat a lot of baked potatoes. It was one of the items that they had on the menu, and oddly enough, tuna fish. And I bet I've eaten one baked potato and maybe one tuna fish sandwich in the last 3 years. Like,
Really?
I don't want that anymore. I had more of that than I ever wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another example, I guess.
No, it's interesting because potatoes are like such a comfort food for
I mean, I like potatoes, but I don't want a baked potato.
Too much of anything can ruin it, for sure. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just hypothesizing, but maybe, again, the appetite with the body going, that's not my main concern right now. We're working on the lungs. So just kind of going to a resting place with that, maybe.
Yeah, delayed gastric emptying, and they call it esophageal dysmotility, are pretty common post-transplant. And they are not, there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah.
So it's just something you have to learn to live with.
Okay. Wow.
But like you said, it's doable. You can manage it.
It's just amazing to hear you talk about some of the post ramifications because you just look so healthy. You look amazing.
I feel good. I don't. Sitting here, I feel like my old self. The first year, I'm just trying to live. I've got this open wound.
Yeah.
And then I had the rejection episode. The second year was really more about really getting my strength back.
Mm-hmm.
And I still could be stronger. I've had to resign myself to the fact that I'm not going to probably have the endurance I had before. And it's not always lungs and legs, but my back just doesn't want to stand all day. There's a few things a volunteer opportunity I wanted to help with Cakeable. I know you're familiar with that.
Yes, we did an episode on Cakeable.
Yeah, so I've been over there a couple of times. It's a little hard for me to stand that long. Mm-hmm. So that's my goal with therapy right now, is to work where I can stand longer and be able to, work over there a little bit.
I'm a big advocate for goals, and it's not that we live on I'm not saying at all like we live on a performance based, because I know our society is performance based, like your values tied to what you can do, and I don't agree with that at all. But I do think goals are so good for us just personally to say, like, all right, I'm going to set this one, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be able to set another one, I'm going to do it, because it just gives that momentum to build everything, like the mental fortitude, the emotional strength, the physical strength. I think goals are great when they're healthy and within reason and all that. I think goals are a great thing.
I've always been a goal setter, and part of that's your job and as therapy, or setting achievable goals and short-term, long-term goals is kind of just something I've adapted to, but incorporated rather. But
like with your life now, I think having goals would be so beneficial instead of just going, well, we'll just see, whatever it is. That doesn't help move the needle,
Right.
Like keep you going forward, keep your life going forward. That's really good. That's good. So you're working, at Cakeable some now, and then you'll have more goals to do.
Right. More travels and things that we hope to do, for sure.
Absolutely. So if we talk about a little bit, this gets kind of, I know, tender. So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was your story is beautiful. You're an amazing person. You have handled this better than anyone I know would.
Thanks.
It's hard to think about having to, like what you were saying before about, like, did this really happen to me? Have I really gone, through all this?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not everybody listening will one day need a transplant because of a chronic health issue, but boy, it could take like an acute issue, like a bad car accident or something, where all of a sudden they realize, oh, my life has totally changed now.
Right.
So I think educational awareness on the process and the person behind it is so important, because none of us know what tomorrow's going to be. And so on that note, switching to the donor side. Right. So what information are you given about the donor? Anything at all?
So that you do not know who your donor is.
Okay.
That's kept confidential. You can write a letter to your donor, their family, and there are guidelines for that. You can't tell them who you are. You can just talk to them about your experience, or of course your gratitude, and maybe what you've been able to do since your transplant, that kind of thing. The agency that does the organ procurement and transplant coordination, I guess to say, it's sent to them. They know who my donor is, and they send it to the donor family. And the donor family can then decide if they want to reveal who they are and have you reveal who you are. And then you can have your relationship away from that organization. So I have not done that. There are people in my support group who have had both ends of the spectrum of a reply, a response. So some who have described beautiful relationships with their donor's family. They know all about their donor and what led to their death. And then they have some people who have sent multiple letters who have never received a reply. So in the beginning, I was hesitant to write a letter for this main reason, was that nowadays, if you decide to be an organ donor, you could potentially donate organs to numerous people. You have your heart, lungs, liver, pancreas, eyes, corneas, on and on. The liver can be divided into pieces and affect more than one person. One kidney to two different people. So it can be a lot of people. And in my mind, I thought, this precious family is grieving, and to be bombarded with letters from potentially a dozen people felt inappropriate to me at the moment. And that's just me. It may not, you don't know who that person is, and they may have wanted a letter right away. But anyway, I just felt like I needed to give them a good year to grieve. Go through those firsts. The first birthday they missed, the first Christmas, all of this.
That's so compassionate of you.
So the second year, I wrote my letter, and I have it on my phone, saved. But I began to just really pray about when the right time was. And truthfully, this may sound selfish, but I felt like I really needed to be prepared to not get a reply, first of all, but to handle the reply when I got it, if I did get one. And I'm not there yet, I have to say. I just haven't felt like, I think part of it is that, and I don't know for sure, I don't have any idea, but with the way they told me, as I mentioned to you, that my donor was going to be a small person, I think it might be a child, and I just don't know if that grief, how that's going to affect me. That's selfish. But I just am not there.
Human. I'm not.
Yeah.
I see it more as human than selfish.
Yeah. I want to be able to be in a place where I can deal with that, and then I'll send the letter. So, and I feel like I'm certainly closer than I was. But I have not moved forward with that. But you can, for those who are listening who might be in that situation, there are ways to meet your donor's family.
How has the donor's sacrifice, and I'm sure the family working on their behalf to make decisions or whatever, carrying out their wishes, if that's the case, how has that affected you, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I think about it mostly on my anniversary, because I know I'm celebrating and their day is looking a lot harder than mine. They're grieving. They're reopening wounds and revisiting a terrible day. Yeah. And so I think about them a lot, but I particularly think about them at that point. And, how do you thank somebody for doing that? They're at the hardest, most imaginably painful experience, and they choose to do something very selfless, and they do it to honor that person. So I don't talk about it, but inside I try to live my life in a way that would honor that sacrifice.
And you do it so well. I know this last anniversary you had, your Facebook post was so grateful, thankful, celebratory, but you were so quick to also say, I'm also thinking about the family who's having a really hard day today. And you don't even know who the person is or their family, but I just think that you honor them so well, and you have such a heart of gratitude.
I think the greatest way to do that is to continue to live. Take care of this gift that's been given to me. Take my pills, go to my therapy, do the things that the doctors tell me, and live as long as possible. Not just to live, but to live well, and
Yeah.
that would
Yeah.
be the best way to,
Sure.
show them gratitude. I
Sure.
think.
If it's not too personal, could I, and you don't have to answer if it's uncomfortable, but have you ever felt any sense of survivor's guilt?
Yeah.
You versus them?
I think that that's something some people do experience. I don't know that I've always felt pain and hurt that somebody died in order that I would, be able to receive these lungs. But I do know that wasn't the reason that they passed away, So I don't necessarily really feel guilty for it.
Good.
No.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm the
Yeah.
last person to try to speak for someone who's been in a position to have their bodies donated, but I would think they'd want you not to feel guilty.
Right.
They want you to live and nurture yourself and go with life.
Right.
Live the life that they couldn't. I think that would be what they would want. That would be what I would want if it was me donating. So, yeah, I'm glad. I'm really glad. But it's a question to ask because I'm sure that there's help for that if people need that.
I'm sure.
Kind of like why do I get to live and not them? I could see that could be a real obstacle in the healing journey. Mm-hmm.
I feel like I probably have a tendency to an avoidance type of personality, so I just try not to go there really.
Yeah.
More than I need to.
It's good. It's good. Yeah. Well, I think that you've honored their life and you continue to very, very, very well.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that there's so many support groups available. I had no idea. I'm so glad. Could you talk about some of the ways that you self-care? So support groups would be one, counseling would be one, but what are some of the things that you do for yourself to keep kind of like your mind, body, spirit calm and peaceful and enjoying the day you're given? What do you do nice for yourself?
Well, my life is a lot slower than it used to be, and that part of that's just because Brent has now retired and we're out in Waxhaw and we just don't have much going on. But I have found a lot of joy and contentment in just, spending time with Brent and reading, relaxing. We have a very quiet, still little life. The kids are not in the home anymore. And with the post-COVID world that we live in, there's just not a lot of buzzing around like we probably used to do. I don't know if that's true for you, but...
No, it's a totally different world we live all in.
Yeah, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
Some people talk about that empty nester phase and transition, and I'm like, I call it a rhythm. It's a whole different rhythm, and I like it. It suits me.
Good.
So, yeah.
Good. Yeah, that's great. That's great. You talked about how you want to keep everything as calm as you can and how, you don't have as much of a tolerance for stress and stuff. So it sounds like being with your favorite guy and reading. And
and maybe you would feel like prayer is a self-care activity, but one of the biggest blessings of this whole journey and this story is my prayer life has just changed so much. I talked about it a little bit earlier about finding it easier to pray for other people. I have tried to adopt a philosophy of if someone asks for prayer, I stop and I pray that very minute, because I think my life before was like, I will pray for that, and I might get to it, and most of the time I would, but maybe there are times when I didn't, and I should have. And I've tried to when people ask for prayer, I stop and pray right then, and it's been a joy and a blessing and a privilege and something it's just a big part of my life now. I welcome the opportunities to pray for people because I just saw so much how the Lord blessed me through so many people's prayers. And I think if there's one message about this whole journey, and I didn't speak about much of it during this conversation, but I had so many people praying for me. People I never knew and will never meet. I have a friend who is a Messianic Jewish rabbi, and he's used to live here in Charlotte, now lives out in California. He had people in Israel putting my name in the Wailing Wall.
Oh my goodness.
Just literally people praying all over the world. When I can say that literally. And I would hope that this story would bless them to know that God hears your prayers and He answers them. And there's great encouragement in that. So, yeah, my prayer life has been emboldened, and I find a lot of peace and comfort and joy in doing that now.
Yes. Joy of the Lord is our strength. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned the neighbor you hadn't even met mowed your lawn. You've got people putting your name in the wailing wall. What are some of the ways that, like, your immediate family, I know your brother opened up his home to you, which is no small thing. What are, so for family members that have someone that is about to or is in the process of transplant or another serious medical crisis, like what are some of the best ways that you found was helpful from your support system?
So any advice to a family member is to, understand what you're getting ready to go into. And the most important thing I think that is important for them to do is to have empathy for the organ recipient, the person going through that trial. I see some sad stories on my Facebook page where family members are not truly understanding what you're going through and expecting you to do more and do better and get back to work and do all these things, not really understanding how sick you may be and how hard it may be to get better as much as you want to, and there's little patience and things like this. So I think a lot of that just comes from just not understanding and having a lack of education or appreciation for the process and the journey, and to understand that before you get into it, it helps you to be that empathetic and compassionate and understanding caregiver. But you also, as a caregiver, at least in people who are in a journey like mine, that caregiver is called upon to keep you going and not let you off the hook when you don't want to do things that are going to get you better. Yeah. So there is a little bit of a balance, but I think there's I sense more of an error on the not quite getting it side and not being compassionate and empathetic enough for the patient.
So do the due diligence of doing the homework to find out like the nuances of before, during, and after, because you talked about so many different avenues that I wouldn't have even known about, like of like this prednisone that you need to be on. It affects your kidneys. Like there's it's an intricate puzzle, and so do the homework and ask the questions.
Right.
For sure.
Be ready. And and understanding how important a caregiver can be in the success in the outcome. Because I know at least at Duke, they impress upon you that without a good caregiver, you're not going to make it.
Really?
Yeah, they won't even do it if you don't, like I said earlier, if you don't have a caregiver. And that can be really heartbreaking. I'm seeing in my support group people who are literally alone, and they don't have a family member, and they're asking, does anyone know anybody that can be my caregiver?
Oh, mercy.
Because they won't do this transplant if I don't have a caregiver. And people need different layers of support afterward. I needed a lot. Some people don't need as much, but you definitely need someone. And they know, again, the whole, it's not uncommon after this procedure that they may hit periods of just depression or lack of motivation to take their medicine, and you've got to take your medicine, and you've got to stay active, and they might just want to go home and sit in the chair without somebody gently pushing them to, let's get back to it.
So is there such a thing as like a surrogate caregiver?
I don't know. I didn't have to ask those questions, fortunately, because I had good caregivers. I think they do frown upon you having to hire someone to do that, because they might get into it and realize they want to quit.
Right.
But I think I mentioned.
But honestly, family can quit on you too.
Sometimes those would be better than families. Well, not in my case, thank goodness. But they have to sign a contract that they will.
They do. Yeah.
Help you do these things.
Yeah. Wow.
So
So this is a incredibly broad question, and you've answered it in a lot of ways already. But basically, one big question would be, how has the transplant changed your life?
As far as how my life has changed, in a lot of ways, I feel like my old self and things haven't changed, but things have changed a lot. I'm a different person for sure. I'm a lot more laid back, I think. I don't worry too much about some things. I still worry, but I was the queen of worrying before. I think I made comment earlier about just not sweating the small things. Just things roll off a little bit easier than they used to. I don't get that worked up or worried upset about things as I did before. But the most valuable thing, Christy, out of the whole experience is the dynamics of our family. We don't hesitate to tell each other how much we love each other, how much we care about each other, how much we value our time together. I wouldn't trade that for anything. The depth of connection and love in our family has grown so much.
Wow.
And it's just been a beautiful, beautiful thing. It has renewed my sister's faith and trust in the Lord. Everything in that regard is just so rich. So you don't want to have to go through something like that to get to that point, but it really is something I treasure and value and wouldn't trade for anything.
But it says a lot about you and your family, because crisis and trauma can rip a family apart too.
True.
But the fact that you guys locked arms and lean into it together and are closer on the other side of it, that's a choice. Because, I mean, people can just be like, I can't deal with this, I'm out. I mean, people can leave people at the worst moments. People can shut down, withdraw. And some of that is normal, of course, within the grieving process. But grieving doesn't mean someone has to die. Grieving can be, just change. Grieving change, which is what this has done.
Yeah.
But the fact that you guys aren't bitter and salty and angry, like, why did this have to happen, all of that.
Right.
This is a lot about you and your family.
Thank you. Yeah. My brother had a harder time. He could not come to see me at the hospital before my transplant. It was just too much. But I didn't feel abandoned. I understood it. I was like, I'm kind of like that. Like, you don't like to see people. I'm visual that way, and I like those kinds of images burn in my mind. I can't unsee them, kind of thing. But he was there the night they called me to surgery, and he sat those 10 hours all night long in the waiting room with my sister and my husband. It wasn't, I'm sure, a picnic for him to have everybody come to his home for 4 months and live, and then bring the dog too.
That's showing love in a very tangible way.
Yeah. So our family has really grown closer. Our parents are gone, and we just, as far as my family, it's just me, my brother, and sister, and of course they extends that out to Brent and the kids. But we're very close, and I'm so grateful for that, because in my line of work, I've seen a lot of hard, family relationships and things. It's sad to think that people don't always have that.
It makes me think of back when we were talking about preventative measures, about keeping, in our good physical health and having our paperwork and affairs in order. Also, doing the work ahead of time with family on just on a normal daily basis to stay close, stay intentional. So when those stressors in life, those big things, those storms come, there's a well to draw from. Would you say that it was important? Because you are such a loving person. I know you love your husband and you love your kids. I mean, we've been doing kids, preschool. So I know how much you love your family, and they love you right back. And I just feel like you guys being able to really lean into this together is a culmination of a lot of intentional work along the years.
I'll credit my parents, because we just had a great home childhood, and my parents were just super amazing and loving. But I always remember my mother saying, one day you're not going to have anybody but each other. And I think part of that came from the fact that they had us late in life. They knew that they weren't probably going to be around. My dad was in his mid-40s when I was born, and my mom was pushing 40. And they actually did live long lives. My mother was 89 and my dad was 92, so we did have them for a while. But they were always saying, and I find myself saying those things to Grant and Emily. Y'all are going to be the only family you have when we're gone. And we had Emily and Grant late in our lives. I was in my mid-30s. So, part of that I attribute to my parents, learning from them how important family is and nurturing our relationships. And I do that with my children. I try to encourage and nurture their relationship with each other apart from us. So, I'm sad for people that don't have that, for sure.
Yeah. Well, we encourage people to start today, right?
Right.
Pick up that phone, make that call, or write that note or send that text.
What are you waiting for?
To start.
Life is short.
It is short. Repair those bridges. Be the first person to stand in a healthy situation. Not asking anyone to go into something not healthy or not appropriate, but just however it could be up to you. I think the Bible even says that. However it is up to you, live at peace with one another. And that way, when the storms come, there's strength to draw from with each other. And it doesn't shock or surprise me a bit that you guys are even closer now. That makes a lot of sense, for sure.
It's a blessing.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap up, is there... I just want to leave it wide open to you. Is there something else about your story that you want to share?
I've referenced a lot of details, and I left one that's really, this is a goosebump kind of
Oh, good. Go for it.
thing. We have a friend, I know you'll know who I'm talking about. He's a nurse, and he works down at CMC in Pineville. And I knew that he worked in the emergency room, but I think at some point in his nursing career, he's moved into working in the OR.
Okay.
And I don't talk to him that often, but he actually called me a couple of months ago on an unrelated topic. But of course, while we were talking, he was asking me how I was doing, and he went on to share that he, as one of his roles now, is to work in the operating room when they're harvesting organs for donation.
Oh, wow.
And we don't know, like I said, I don't know who my donor was. I don't know where they lived. I don't know where they came from. But he was doing one of these surgeries when a Duke doctor was present to get a pair of lungs about the time of my transplant. And it's...
Whoa.
Don't know for sure. He doesn't know either. But wouldn't it just be like the Lord to have put him in that room when that happened?
Yes. It did get me goosebumps all over.
Of course.
Wow.
Lord has every detail covered. So I say that to give anyone who is struggling with a lack of faith or trust that he can do anything. And I told him, I know when I was in the hospital, there's phases of grief. I know you are familiar with all those. And I don't know if this was necessarily, I was in the bargaining phase. I'd already had my transplant, but I did tell the Lord, if you see me through this, I will do everything I can to spend my days giving you glory for what you've done for me.
And you do
so
that
I hope
well.
I've done that today.
Absolutely. Just a beautiful, glorifying story that's powerful and life-changing. I don't know how you've been so strong. Can you tell us what made you grow closer and run to God rather than getting so angry or discouraged that you run away from him? Like, how? That's another choice that we have,
I mean, I don't even know any other way, I mean, I don't know if this makes sense, but when Grant was a baby, he was only like about a year old, and he had to have surgery. And I remember being at the hospital that morning and having to literally like place him in the arms of this nurse that was going to take him to the OR room. And I was like, Lord, I cannot be this child's anesthesiologist or his surgeon. I have no choice here but to trust you to take care of him. And if things go bad, to take care of me. And I feel like I've recalled that so many times in my life. It's like I do better when I don't really have a choice.
Right.
If I can fix it, I'll do everything to
Yeah.
fix it, and I'm strong-willed and I'll get it done. But when I don't have a choice, it's kind of easy for me to go, "It's yours,
Yeah.
Lord. You can do it."
Yeah.
And that's kind of how this whole thing has been. I really didn't have a lot of choices here,
Right.
and I don't know. I think about it a lot of times. I was talking with a friend yesterday. I don't know what people who don't have the Lord do. I don't know how they do it. You know, how they even get up in the middle of the day and get the day started. Because without a faith to lean on, I don't know how you function. I just don't. So, yeah, it wasn't, I don't know if that sounds arrogant, but it just wasn't hard to do. Because what other choice did I have?
Yeah.
And God just showed himself faithful over and over and over, all those details.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't mention that about a year before my transplant, I don't even know how this person's Instagram thing came up on my feed one day, and I started reading. Her name is Amanda Auer. She lived at the time in California. Her 2-year-old daughter had become suddenly gravely ill with congestive heart failure and was going to need a transplant. And I don't even know, like I said, how it showed up, but I started reading her Instagram account and following that, and I followed that whole journey. This was a year or more before my transplant, but I've thought about it a lot since, thinking God was kind of using that to start me thinking about transplants, and this was going to be in my future, because I was just riveted to her account to see how the child was doing. And
Sure.
she and her husband is a musician, and he's in the praise and worship in his church, and they're Christians, of course, and they now live in Tennessee. And I still follow her, but her prayers were just so rich, and it's just a blessing to read. And so I was kind of like drawn to this story. And I can see now, look back and say, God knew, he was starting that preparation for me years before.
Yeah.
And then all the details that and the things that he did to pull me through. I mean, it's easy to walk when you know that God's got this. It's all in his plan.
When we're walking with him, when those hard times come and we are grasping for hope and peace and all of those things to get us through, strength, it's wonderful to be able to look behind. I like to picture it like a path where every day that we live with him, it's like another stone has been laid down, creating a path in front, but also behind, because you look and you go, oh, I see the path that he's brought me on, so this stone is when he did this. This stone is how he helped that. This stone is when he showed up in this. And so I think it makes kind of looking forward a little, I don't want to say easier, because life isn't always easy, but it makes it more digestible to look forward, to say, okay, I can keep going and doing this, because I can literally see all the ways in which he's already shown
faithful.
up. He's been faithful. And in your whole life, and especially in this journey, and boy, has he been in the details.
I mean it.
Just the
There's
biggest
no
and the
denying
smallest.
it. I mean, it's really, we serve a God who's in the miracle business to this day. And there's small miracles and there's big miracles, and there's things that you put all together that feel like a pretty big miracle. And it's humbling to know that I'm a recipient of that miracle.
Yes.
Somebody who's, listen, I'm not worthy of it. He's worthy of giving it, and he does that for anybody. You don't have to be a certain person of notoriety to receive his blessings.
And we don't have to earn it.
No.
But yet he thinks you're worth it.
Isn't that good?
Isn't that good? Yeah. So, final question I have, I guess, is, so what would you say to encourage someone who's facing a transplant or living with a serious chronic issue? What would you say to their family and friends and to them to encourage them today? They just need something.
What looks to the world and in your eyes is impossible. Nothing is impossible with God. He can do anything. And He does. And He will. So take faith, have heart that it's going to be okay. And just one day at a time, one step at a time, like you were saying, He wants you to worry, not let tomorrow's worries, get ahead of you. Just take today and focus on that.
Yeah, that's a good word, because today's all we've got.
That's right.
None of us know tomorrow, so.
That's true.
That's right.
That's true.
Oh, Wilkie, thank you so much for. I mean, how do I thank you? You have been so open and vulnerable and so willing to share.
I appreciate the opportunity. I really do.
People need to hear your story. They need to hear your strength, your hope, your optimism.
Thank you.
They need to hear it, and I'm so grateful. This was
I'm
a hard
grateful.
ask. I know. I sat there as like, oh, do I have the guts to like ask her to come and like just lay this all out for us? And I'm so appreciative.
I'm glad you did. I've been looking forward to an opportunity. I have not ever shared that, but when you see the story from beginning to end, I hope people will be blessed. And I mean, I think it's
absolutely
pretty good story.
Absolutely. And keep living life to the fullest. Keep loving that family.
That's right.
So
That's
sweet.
right.
And,
Thank you again.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a blessing.
Oh, what a joy. What a joy. I've enjoyed hearing details I've never heard yet. And to just see you and how beautiful and well you look. It just gives you paint such a great picture of what hope and healing can be. And I hope that you continue to do above and beyond, that you're breaking records and setting new bars and just dumbfounding doctors.
Amen.
Like,
I see that.
She's just rocking it around the world.
The doctor told me, I was just at Duke last week actually. Things looked great.
There you go.
My doctor said, you're in the sweet spot. And I was like, yeah, I'll take that.
Oh,
I'm in the sweet spot.
Let's stay there.
Get some stuff done now.
Yes, excellent. Let's go out and have more fun in life. Let's go do it. Set those goals, those dreams, and do it. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks again, Wilkie.
Thank you, Christy.
The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended to replace medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any medical concerns or questions, please consult a qualified healthcare professional. Thanks again for listening to part 2 of Wilkie's incredible double lung transplant journey. If you're interested in becoming an organ donor, first of all, thank you. To donate organs at death is a simple registration process through the state where you reside. For North Carolina residents, for example, you can register at donatelifenc.org. Or more conveniently, anyone can register at the DMV. For live organ donation, the process is a bit more comprehensive, and you can find more information on that at organdonor.gov. Most importantly, please make your wishes known to your family so they can honor your request. Organ donation is the last, best, most precious gift you can give someone. Please consider being an organ donor today. Thanks again for listening to Real Deep Stuff. Follow us and subscribe to save your seat at the table for the next conversation. Also, check out our Facebook page to continue the conversation on today's topic. We'll see you there.